It was meant to evoke nostalgia. I'm going to tell you this too. It did evoke nostalgia. I cried twice. I did. I admit it. I cried twice during this movie because, like, there were just some parts that were so on the nose that I was like, were you at my cousin's house growing up when we were all playing Barbies? Because I'm starting to feel like I'm having a moment, a tear stream down my cheek. I swear to God. This was a movie about creativity and imagination. This was not a movie about the patriarchy. And I'll tell you what, at the end of the movie, Ben Shapiro magically left this out of his little review. At the end of the movie, the woman who created Barbie, who is now guiding Barbie into the real world, she flat out says the patriarchy is a made up concept. That is in the movie. So all these people, all these conservatives who are screaming and crying, the movie said the word patriarchy. Conservatives are so triggered by the word patriarchy, simply by the word patriarchy, that they don't listen to everything else that is around the word patriarchy because they were mocking the idea of the existence of a patriarchy. And Ben Shapiro in his review wanted to be like, well, you know, it was so easy for the men to come in and take over the world. Do you know why Ken went I'm going to be giving away plot lines in this movie, but it will not ruin the movie for you if you haven't seen it, to be honest, because the whole point of the movie is to make you feel that emotional feeling of when you were playing with Barbies, and you should all go. If you played with Barbies as a kid, you should go. Even if you don't want to admit you played with Barbies as a kid, you should go because it's fucking great. Do you know why Ken had to go back to Barbie Land to take over Barbie Land? Because, okay, so here's what happened. Barbie Land is a matriarchy, okay? The women control everything in Barbie Land because when you are a young girl and you are playing with Barbie, the point is to play with Barbies. All right? So, of course, in Barbie Land, the Barbies are going to rule Barbie Land because that is the entire point of playing with Barbies as a young girl, is that Barbie is every girl and every girl wants to be Barbie, and there's a Barbie for everyone. And you can dress up your Barbie, you can do this with that Barbie, you can do that with Barbie. Ken was an accessory to Barbie. Ken was not the point. So, what happens in the movie is Barbie has to go to the real world. And Ken has no identity without Barbie. Ken is obviously in love with Barbie. He follows Barbie everywhere. He wants Barbie to be in love with him. Is actually something really endearing about it. Ken doesn't understand who he is without Barbie, right? So when Barbie goes to the real world, Ken basically like goes with her, but like not by her choice. Like he kind of like he snuck his way into the car and announced like when they were already on their way to the real world, and Barbie said, "Fine, you can come to the real world with me." Fine. So they get into the real world, and Ken starts to realize that he as a man is a lot more quote unquote respected in the real world than he was in Barbie Land. Okay? And he kind of likes this. He's like, this woman asked me the time and she called me sir. And he kind of likes this. He's like, and it's basically a contrast of like Barbie didn't pay attention to Ken. Well, now some people are paying attention to Ken. And then Ken goes and finds a book about the patriarchy. But the ironic thing is that Ken doesn't really care about the patriarchy. Ken cares about horses. I don't really understand the horse stuff. Did Ken like? I don't understand the horse references. Maybe I didn't have a Ken doll. My cousin had a Ken doll. I didn't really care about Ken. I don't know if there's like a horse thing around Ken. I don't know. But Ken is obsessed with horses. But at some point, he also gets a book that explains the patriarchy to him. And then and he thinks this is this big epiphany. He's like, men rule the world. I can do anything I want here simply by being a man. And then what Ken does is Ken tries to go and get a job. Ken goes to try to get like a job at like a big time corporation. He just walks into like a company. He's like, "Can you give me some high level do nothing job that pays me lots of money?" And they're like, "No, you need an MBA for that." And then tries to go to the hospital to be a doctor, and he walks in. He's like, "Will you hire me as a doctor to do a surgery?" And the woman doctor that he's talking to is like, "No, because you're not a doctor. We're not going to hire you." So what I'm saying here is that Ken discovered the patriarchy, literally tried to take advantage of the patriarchy that conservatives are all wound up about. Ken tries to take advantage of the patriarchy in the real world, and he finds out, and I shit you not, Ken discovers that the real world has not implemented the patriarchy correctly. Because Ken can't just like waltz into any company and get a job just for being a man. He can't just waltz right into a hospital without, being a doc and getting a job without being a doctor. Ken actually comes to the conclusion that the real world has not implemented patriarchy correctly. Like they had like the right idea of like men being in charge, but they implemented it wrong because he couldn't get anything he wanted just by being a man. And so he comes to that conclusion that they like it's kind of like the argument of like real socialism has never been tried. That was exactly what I was thinking in my head. This is like in Ken's head, this is like the real patriarchy has never been tried. And so Ken's like, "You know what? Since they screwed up the patriarchy in the real world, I'm going to go back to Barbie land and I'm going to implement the patriarchy correctly." That's why he goes back to Barbie land, because the patriarchy in the real world doesn't work. So he goes back to Barbie land and he explains the patriarchy to all the men. And then the men come in because the women are not paying attention. And the men come in and they take over all the women's dream homes, and they redecorate all of the women's dream homes to like have man things and like horses and beers and stuff like that. And they convince the women to like serve them beers on the beach or whatever, and to basically look after them like Ken felt like he should have been in the real world. Oh, and I joke in the middle of it. Oh my god, hang on. Jesus. So the women, because the women have never lived in a world before where like people weren't just nice to each other and did things for each other. The women were like, "Yeah, Ken, we don't mind doing this." It was like their defenses were down. They didn't know that the Kens were trying to rule them, because I don't think the women actually ever consciously tried to rule the Kens. It was just like, "This is Barbie land. This is what we do here. This is the whole purpose of this thing." So the Kens got the women to like bring them beers and do that sort of stuff, and they created their own patriarchal society. Well, Barbie comes back, and of course, the whole society is a mess. It's basically like the difference between like a men's bathroom and a woman's bathroom, right? Men have created messes everywhere. Men have redecorated and have horrible taste. And it's like, and you know what the thing is there was actually something sweet about it, because all the men really all they wanted, all the Kens wanted, was to have Barbie's attention. That was it. None of them cared. They didn't really. I mean, you find this out as like the movie plays out. Ken didn't really want to be in charge. Like the men didn't really want to be in charge. They just wanted attention from the Barbies. That was all it was about. And so the women, because they knew that the Kens just wanted attention from them, used that to distract the Kens to get them to fight each other so that the women could go and fix everything that the men had broken, which is exactly something that would happen if you were playing a game with Barbies. And again, like you guys, anyone who played with toys growing up understands what this is. This is like this is kind of like if you had a day where like maybe it was raining outside or something, and so everyone's kind of like stuck in, maybe this is just my childhood. Like everyone, it's raining outside, and so I'm over at my cousin's house, and when I was at my cousin's house because my grandmother babysat us like at all the kids in the family at my cousin's house, and we all went down to the basement. Okay, because the basement was just where we hung out. It was where the TV was. It was where the fucking Barbies and the Dream Hosts were. It was where the GI Joes were. All the toys were in the basement. All right. So it's one of those rainy days, and you have the female cousins and the male cousins all stuck in the basement together, and there's Barbies on one side and there's GI Joes on the other side, and you have like a fucking war. You play a game. That's what this movie was. Like, I don't know how better to explain this. This movie was just make believe. It was, if anything, it was making fun of the idea of the patriarchy because literally Ken didn't believe that the real world had actually implemented the patriarchy correctly. And then when he tried to implement it, he was easily overthrown because he didn't actually really care about it. And the Barbies at the end decided to treat the Kens better than they were because they understood that Kens have feelings too, and you got to treat them better than how you've been treating them because they're ultimately like good guys that literally just wanted Barbie's attention. That was all it was.